Over the last 2 years, the Sony A7IV Mark IV used to be my main camera when it came down to portrait photography. And in this video I'm going to give you a breakdown how I did set up my A7 Mark IV for portrait photography, which custom buttons have I programmed to which function, what settings do I use, and the overall idea how you could set up your Sony A7IV Mark IV for portrait photography as well. Let's start off with custom button number 1, which is basically next to your eyepiece. When I press my custom button, this is basically programmed for my eye autofocus. If I want to toggle between the left eye and the right eye, I found this very handy, and it's conveniently close to my thumb as well. So whenever I shoot and press the shutter button, I always got the thumb on this custom button number 1, which then lets me allow to choose between the left eye and the right eye. My custom button number 2 is basically set to my focus area. If I want to choose between a wide focus area, zone focus, center fix focus, spot focus, or expandable spot focus, this is very convenient in my way how I shoot, so I can easily change quickly my focus point between wide to zone. Got the joystick and then can move around basically my zone focus point very conveniently also on the tip of my finger. So anytime I want to change my focus point, I just need to go from a shutter button over to C2. My third custom button is basically set to the focus mode. This allows me to choose between autofocus single shot, autofocus automatic, and autofocus continuous. At the moment I use a lot the automatic autofocus mode for the simple reason the camera will detect if the subject is still or is moving and accordingly chooses your autofocus mode towards your subject. On the other hand side, if you shoot a lot of people or portraits, then autofocus continuous is a good choice as well, because every single time when your model moves a bit, you always got your autofocus going, your autofocus following the subject and making sure that you get sharp images every single time you hit the shutter button. And my fourth custom button, C4, is basically programmed to face and eye priority in autofocus to switch it off and on and toggle between on and off as I need to. Sometimes you want to switch off the eye autofocus because sometimes the camera can get a bit confused. Let's say you would take a group picture at a wedding as an example. You might want to consider switching your eye autofocus off so the camera focus on everyone and not just on one single person, which perhaps stands a bit in front compared to everyone else. So having the option for a quick C4 button, I have autofocus on, I have autofocus off, can be very handy in certain moments. And then you got basically 2 more buttons programmed from a manufacturer, and this is basically the right button on your wheel. If you press this one, you jump into your ISO mode and quickly can choose which ISO you would like to use. Let's say ISO 200, press a button and you shoot ISO 200. If you press to your left, you can choose the drive mode you're using, such as like single shooting or even continuous shooting. For my style of portraits, I shoot to 99% single mode because it takes one photograph and then I move on to the next one. And then basically I have one more button programmed, and this is my AEL button to the right of my thumb underneath the wheels. This is basically my button which I use for shot preview results. This is a good function button when you add the flash onto your camera. The live preview doesn't give you the true reflection of your exposure anymore. With my current settings of ISO 100 f8 by 250ths of a second, my display actually should be black and give me a black display as a live preview. But you can change this when pressing an AEL button when you programmed it, and it gives you a proper live preview again, what your exposure looks like without the flash. Let me show you how you can set up your custom buttons as well. Jump into menu and come down to the briefcase, jump over to number 4, dial customize, and then you jump over to custom key dial setup for photography, press OK, and then basically here you can choose which function button you would like to program, which you like to change, or even some of them aren't even programmed yet, such as like the button here in the middle of a wheel is not programmed. And this gives you great flexibility to customize your camera to your needs, whatever you need, whatever you want, and whatever you think will work for yourself. And then basically my function button or function menu button basically has all the same functions programmed into the function button menu as well. So it gives me all functions I programmed to the button in one menu. And if I wanted to change something quickly, I don't need to reconsider every single time which custom button I programmed to which function. So I can jump into the function menu if I wanted to and go over to focus mode, change the focus mode if I need to, jump back out and keep shooting. And if you wanted to program your function button, the AF button, jump into your menu, come over to the last icon, number 3, Operation Customize, and then jump over to the FN menu settings. And here you can basically program your function menu as well for video and photo. So you basically got 2 function menus lined out here. Program your photography one and it keeps the settings for photography. Program a function once for video and it will keep them for video as well. Let's talk about image quality and file savings. If you come over to your menu again and you come over to your camera icon, jump over to image quality, jump one more over and go to image quality settings. Here you basically decide if you want to shoot RAW, JPEG and RAW, or only JPEG. I personally like to shoot RAW only. This is personal preference because I do edit most of my images afterwards anyway, but even if I wanted to have a quick export, I still can put the file or the photograph onto the laptop, give it a very quick edit and export it as a JPEG. But also the thing with the RAW files is it gives you the most flexibility when it comes down later in post. And if you come further down, record media settings, you can basically decide if you want to shoot both cards at the same time, you want to record your photographs only to 1 slot, 2 slots, simultaneously recording, sword recording. I personally like to record or take a photograph to both SD cards at the same time. So basically my first SD card is also set up for my video and photo and the second card is only for photo. However, I do like to shoot to both cards RAW. This gives me the best and most flexibility in a way how I work with my camera. And when you decided if you want to shoot JPEG or RAW, you still got the option of a type of compressed or uncompressed file you would like to have. You can have as an example RAW uncompressed, RAW lossless compressed large, RAW lossless compressed medium, lossless compressed small, or you take RAW compressed. I personally shoot RAW compressed. It gives me smaller file sizes, but still with a good amount of detail left. And I haven't seen really a huge difference in uncompressed and compressed RAW. It keeps the file size a bit smaller and it makes it a bit easier for your laptop to handle the files as well. So let's dive a bit deeper into the autofocus system in general. So when you come down to your menu, jump over to AF/MF mode button, jump over to the first icon AF/MF and then come over to focus mode. My focus mode currently is set to automatic AF. This is what I use the most at the moment. This gives me the flexibility. The camera will decide if my subject is in moving condition or still and decides accordingly which autofocus mode to use. But also I can recommend to use the continuous autofocus. Those 2 focus modes, the automatic autofocus mode and a continuous focus mode, gave me the best, most consistent results when it came down to my portrait photography. The priority set in AF as single mode is set to AF. You can set it to release and balanced as well. This basically means that the AF mode will only take a picture when your subject is really in focus. So you can't press the shutter button when your subject is not in focus. I personally found this very handy. That's the same for the priority set in autofocus continuous. To priority set autofocus continuous to AF. You can have release and balanced again. Both settings are set to autofocus in a sense of that I only take a picture when my subject is really in focus. With the release, you can take a picture even if it's not in focus. This is basically meant to give you the flexibility to take a shot, and it's more important to take a photo than actually have something in focus or something is blurry or similar. And the balanced emphasis is basically a mixture of where the camera decides when to release a shutter button to take a photo. But this caused problems for me back in the days where I had pictures taken which weren't 100% in focus. So the AF worked for me so far the best to make sure that my subject is really in focus and I'll only take a photo when the focus is hit. Then we're coming to AF tracking sensitivity. This is set to 4, a bit higher, because I do like a bit more snappy autofocus and it helps me to make sure I hit focus fairly fast. The AF illuminator is basically when you're shooting in a bit of lower, darker conditions, then you basically get this light to help you find focus, to light up your subject basically, and then it helps the camera to find focus and to take a photograph. But now there are a few more things we might want to make sure that they are enabled as well, and this comes down to the display itself. So when we're jumping over in our menu again, come over to the last briefcase item, jump over to number 3, and then come over to display, screen display set. Go right, click on monitor, and here you can add all sort of stuff onto your home screen or your LCD, but you also could take certain things off. Definitely recommended to make sure your histogram, your levels are on. Both will help you. The histogram will help you to expose your image when needed, or you want to work with the histogram more than with the levels at the bottom here or with the plus minus. This can be very handy. But then also the level, which can help you to make sure that your horizon will be even. So here's the level where then tells you if your horizon is even or not. And that's basically how I did set up a monitor as well. Basically all settings for the monitor are pretty much switched on, so I have everything available when needed. I hope you liked this video, guys, and it gave you a good understanding how you potentially could set up your Sony A7IV Mark IV as well for portrait photography. But keep in mind that those settings, those layouts, or this setup of mine can work for any situation as well. It doesn't matter if you shoot landscape photography, street photography, or any other subject. This is just a generic general layout which worked for myself when it came down to my style of photos or portraits I shoot. And with that said, like, comment, subscribe, do all the good stuff. Let me know in the comments what you think about this layout. Does the layout work for you? Have you a similar layout? And with that said, I'm gonna see you, my friend, very soon in another video. Take care.